So let's talk about the Mexicans here in Texas. I'm in Texas if you're not in my class and you're watching this. Twice in the 1820s, America offered to buy Texas from Mexico. And this was not as unreasonable as it might sound. The Mexicans didn't really like Texas. They didn't come here in large numbers. Even though Mexico is south of Texas, because Mexico is on a raised plateau, its weather is much cooler and more temperate. Texas was really too hot and dry for the taste of most Mexicans, and very few moved there. So in 1824, Mexicans offered cheap land and 4 years of no taxes to anyone who's willing to come settle in Texas. And Mexicans don't tend to take them up on this offer, but by 1830, over 7,000 Americans have moved into Texas and are, in fact, a majority of the population. These Americans, by the way, brought their slaves. Stephen F. Austin is one of the pioneers in this. He's from Missouri, and he establishes the first legal American colony in Texas in 1822. His father had actually got the grant and then died, and then Austin, who's here in the picture on the left, will establish that. It's not where Austin is today. It's down by the coast, kind of where Houston is today. The impresario system works like this. As you bring in families, your land grant grows, or actually you're given a giant piece of land, and then you bring families in to settle that. And that's what Stephen F. Austin is going to do. The Americans in Texas, or the Texicans as they call themselves, become the real base of power in Texas. And they don't like Mexican rule. They still tend to see themselves as Americans. Now, the qualifications for moving to Texas were these. You had to renounce your loyalty and your citizenship to America. You had to accept Catholicism, and you had to agree not to have slaves. The Americans who came to Texas, as a general rule, lied about all three of these things. They kept their slaves, they remained loyal to the United States, and they only pretended to be Catholic. And so they were really bad citizens from the get-go. In the 1830s, Santa Anna, seizes control of Mexico. He's a military dictator. And he begins to exert more control over the states of Mexico. The federal government is going to become stronger. This is going to make the Texians really, really, really angry because they were used to being left alone and doing what they wanted. And in 1835, in a place called Gonzales, Texas, not far from here where we are in Austin, a group of Americans will refuse, or former Americans, Texians, will refuse to give up their cannon. They'll put a flag on it that says, "Come and take it." And we consider this to be the beginning of the what we call the War for Independence, but it's really just a bunch of Americans who moved to Texas kind of stealing Texas. They plan from day one to join America. There is no plan to be an independent country. The plan is to win the war against Mexico and then join the U.S. the next day. Santa Anna, of course, invades. He makes a disastrous military decision to try to seize the Alamo, which has no real strategic importance, but is a good defensive position. And a small number of Americans, fewer than 200 Americans, will hold off a large Mexican force, allowing Sam Houston to continue to raise and train his army over near the area that is today Houston. But of course, eventually the Alamo falls. In Goliad, the Mexicans will capture a general and his troops named Fannin, and they will massacre them by forcing them to pick beans out of a bag, and whoever draws a black bean, they shoot. This was actually considered the greater atrocity and more of an inspiration than the Alamo was. Today we remember the Alamo as the key event. But it was actually Goliad at the time that had people much angrier. On April 21st of 1836, Sam Houston will learn that the Mexicans are taking a break in the middle of the day. It was very hot in Texas, and so they took breaks in the middle of the day called siestas. And he will attack the Mexicans during this crucial time. And he will capture Santa Anna and disperse the Mexican army, capturing a lot of it. He will take a wounded Santa Anna and get him to sign a treaty giving the Texians independence. Unfortunately, the Texians will then turn and treat the Mexicans who live in Texas, many of whom fought in the Revolution, people like Juan Seguin, for example, will treat them horribly. There's an intense racism against Mexicans, even Mexicans who helped the white people take Texas. Sam Houston asks his old friend Andrew Jackson to annex Texas. Jackson refuses. Now, we believe today that Jackson sent Houston to Texas for this particular purpose. Houston, by the way, is elected the first president of the Republic of Texas. But Jackson by now has understood that if we annex Texas, it will upset the whole balance between slave and free. Jackson has come to understand that the annexation of Texas would upset the balance between slave and free in the United States, and cause much bigger problems for him than he had previously thought. So Texas finds itself, quite unexpectedly, having to become its own country for a decade. This is the Republic of Texas. France and Great Britain acknowledge Texas, and they see it as a great thing. They see it as a rival to America, a check on American power. And they would like to see Texas actually grow and kind of give America something to worry about and prevent this massive American expansion. This actually begins to make the United States nervous. They don't like the idea of another powerful white country here on the continent. And this anxiety is, and more importantly, the election of 1844, will get John Tyler to ask Texas to reapply for statehood. But in 1844, the Senate votes it down. It's actually a tie. Remember, half the states are slave, half are free. These slave states vote unanimously not to annex Texas, and so the southern states can't get a majority and get that done. We'll pick up the fate of Texas a little bit later.